Welcome to the Combat Sports in Africa podcast. Today, we delve into a powerful narrative of resilience and transformation found in the new book, Bow, Before No Man, The Origin of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Ethiopia. This is more than a story about a sport. It's about young Ethiopian men and women who discovered purpose and strength on the mats amidst immense challenges. In this episode, our very own Garmami sits down with author Colin Stewart and contributor Johnny Sileshi Nigussie. They dive into the book, why and how it was written, while also focusing on the various themes shared by these individual contributors. They'll share insights into the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu scene in Ethiopia and how the sport is fostering community. Johnny will also share his personal journey as a grappler. You don't want to miss it. Don't forget to follow Combat Sports in Africa wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Okay, let's go to the interview.
Okay, we are joined by Colin Stewart and Johnny Sileshi Nigussie. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing? It's good to be here.
I'm doing great.
Doing good, Garmami. Thanks for having me back on the podcast. I always enjoy it.
Well, it's great because now, I see you guys have a book that's been released. It's titled Bow Before No Man, The Origins of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Ethiopia. So I want to talk about this because obviously it's an interesting initiative and product as a book. My first question, and I'm asking this to both of you, what drew you to the story of Jiu Jitsu in Ethiopia, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that is, and what was there a specific moment or experience that made you feel like this was a story that needed to be told?
So, Johnny, I'll jump in first, Johnny, if you don't mind on this one.
Yeah, much better.
So, Garmami, as you know, when I was in Ethiopia, we trained extensively. The guys, we got pretty close. We would have private sessions at my house, and we would have like house parties after training, and the team got pretty close. And during one of those house parties, a few of the guys were over, and there was so much I learned about jiu-jitsu, traditional jiu-jitsu, and you and I have discussed that before, how before I went to Ethiopia, JJIF wasn't something that was on my radar. I learned a lot about Nawaza and that side of the jiu-jitsu world. And I just thought that there was something for the broader jiu-jitsu community to learn and to take away from my experience there. And then just learning aside, there were also so many stories and so many strange things that I never would have fathomed having experienced that I'd kind of been chronicling in my head. And I don't fancy myself a writer or an author, so I never would have taken on a project like that on my own. But at one of those house parties, I mentioned to a few of the folks that were over, Lake was there specifically, Menon, she was there. A few of the team members that I thought would be inclined to kind of share their experience in written form. And I said, hey, I have an idea for a book. If I can get 10 people on the team to agree to contribute with me, I think we should chronicle all the stories of everything that the team's been through over the last 2 years and kind of fashion it as the origin stories, kind of like a superhero-esque way of doing it, like the origin of Johnny Nigussie and how he came up through the ranks, and then what his life was like, and then how it collided when jiu-jitsu was introduced. And a few of the team members, they really liked the idea, and they said, let's do it. And I said, well, hold on a second here. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. Give me a month. If I write 10 pages, we'll do it. But if I can't even hold to my word and write, then the project's never going to move forward. So I took some time. I wrote. And when I hit 10 pages, I was like, all right, we're doing it. And I put the call out for who wants to contribute their stories. And then that's where Johnny can jump in terms of how he was introduced to the idea of the project.
Yeah, well, it took a lot of procrastination just to get the project finished. Colin had to give us a lot of deadlines for us to get our stories ready in time, but it all turned out well at the end. And when I started jiu-jitsu, I was aware of the sport, but obviously through Joe Rogan, like everyone in our school. But uh, I didn't think it was available to us in Ethiopia until one of my co-hosts, where I used to work at the radio station at EBC 104.7, and we had a guest that was coming in. She was popular for converting books that were popular in English to Amharic, and she used to just have different type of dialogues. And because she had a following on TikTok, we invited her, and it turned out that she did jujitsu. My co-host wanted me to interview her, and during our conversation, she ended up telling me how like all the details that I needed. And it turns out the day that she had came was on a Friday, and I think 2 days after that was the first ever Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament in Ethiopia. And the day after that, I just signed up, and I knew like I was there I was there to stay. Like I just felt like the sport was for me from the get go. There was no building up to it. I just knew that there was some. It was one of my favorite, the best products I've ever seen. That's an expression I've heard somebody else say. I just knew it had potential to grow in Ethiopia and to gain popularity just from the get go. And the fact that we had an opportunity to be pioneers in the sport just made it even better. And that's how I got started.
Johnny, thanks for.
Colin.
Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
I was going to say, Johnny, to hear you casually describe procrastination is pretty surreal at this moment in time. Normally, I literally had to fly him to Algeria and sit on top of him, write his story, and then tell him to be a little bit less of a prick in his writing, so his teammates will still roll with him after.
Wow, interesting. If Johnny, if we can go back a little bit, because you mentioned you knew right away that this was your, I'm paraphrasing, I guess, community, you know, that this was your scene, that you wanted to commit yourself. I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, but I guess I am. You wanted to commit yourself to jiu-jitsu. What was the key moment? If you could go back and explain it to us, was it just a rolling session? Was it an emotional feeling of like, oh, this is new, this is hip, what was it that got you connected?
Well, I've always resonated. Like I grew up grappling with my friends when I was younger, and you know, from elementary school all the way to high school. But we didn't have any techniques or anything. We just wrestled mindlessly. But when I came in on my first day, Colin was teaching. Yared wasn't there, and I went inside and I asked them how much is it, and Colin told me that just join, and if you like it, you can sign up. The first 2 classes are for free. I just joined in, and I ended up rolling with people that were half my size. I was over 96 kilograms, and I was strong. So I was surprised whenever I was in a dominant position. Like 5 seconds later, I'm in bottom. I remember rolling with Mita, who was a woman like that was literally half my size, and no matter how much I tried, I just couldn't do anything to her, and she ended up choking me out like 3 times. And right there, I remember thinking, if she can do this at this size, imagine what I'll be able to do if I just stick to it. And uh, I remember on the second day, I worked my body up so much, I had to go behind a parking lot to throw up because the exercise was just too brutal for my body. But it was that's when I learned, like when I got my ass handed to me by someone half my size, I thought, okay, this is something I can learn and get good at.
So essentially, you got baptized in the sport, as you described, through those experiences, which are pretty cool, and I would say that they're not uncommon, right? They're very sort of typical, I guess, storylines for people who start these grappling sports. Johnny, I know now that you're, if we go on social media, for those who follow you or who know of you, of course, you're openly challenging people. Is that correct? You're going into dojos and challenging people. And if you hear any noise in the background, that's just my cat trying to challenge you to a debate or something. So I apologize about that. But no, tell us about the challenges.
Oh yeah, we started out this challenge initially. It was supposed to be for 10,000 birr for anyone that survives 5 minutes against me. they will have a chance of winning 10,000 birr. And it was actually one of my training partners that fronted the reward money, Muhammad. And it ended up becoming a very defensive and boring match. It created boring matches because the guys just wanted to survive. They weren't being aggressive, and that wasn't entertaining for the people to watch. So then after 7 or 6 challenges, we decided to amp up the award to 50,000 birr, and then we made it so that the only way that they can get the money is if they submitted me in 5 minutes. But I'm also going to be aggressive. So oftentimes, most of them get tapped before they even reach there. And after a while, we just got so comfortable. We ended up giving all the challengers 3 or 4 rounds per person. We started going to expos and whatnot. And it turned out people really enjoy watching these challenges. I mean, on TikTok, we're getting over 70,000 views per post, up to like from 15,000 to 70,000 views per post.
That's incredible.
We started going live recently, and over thousands of people just log in, and they're now aware of jiu-jitsu. Before they had no idea what it was. Like when we went to this bodybuilding expo and we asked them if they had any questions, everybody was quiet. At first, I thought they just weren't interested, but then when I got to talk to them, they just had no idea of its existence. A lot of people here don't have the awareness of what the sport is, so they were fascinated by the fact that smaller guys are going up against all these bodybuilders, and we're offering them a huge award because no martial art would offer this in Ethiopia. Nobody would say like, fight me for 50,000 birr in boxing, because you could get punched by luck, and somebody that's bigger than you might come in and have the chances of you losing that money is much higher. But with jiu-jitsu, we could just create a lot of content out of this. And
no, it's very interesting. Has it drawn, so obviously it's drawn attention, but has it converted into future grapplers? Like, are people walking into the dojo and saying, hey, I want to try this sport? Or has it just garnered, from what you're describing, positive, public relations sort of wins and views on social media? Has it converted into practitioners as well?
We've had up to over 400 people asking where they can sign up, and we've been giving them different schedules for the people that are interested. But not only are people asking about signing up in Addis Ababa, though, like when we go on live, people from different parts of Ethiopia are calling and asking if are there schools there. I've had over 20 people now that have asked me if there are branches, schools in Alasa. And then we told them that there are guys in Alasa that have been running a very good program for about a year or so. They haven't stopped. And we just give out numbers. People are always, the interesting thing about this challenge is when you see the comment sections of the videos, it is filled with people that are engaged and going back and forth, and they're invested in it. Like some people that are going on live and asking us questions are saying, we watched all of these videos and we want to know, when can we sign up? Where can we learn? Where can we get this? And we haven't promoted the business as much as the business side of things as much as we should. We've just been sending them DMs and whatnot, but we're working on releasing videos so that people can clearly understand where they can come and get the trainings and where it is available. But people are interested. It's just too soon to tell if, we've had over 4 or 5 people that have converted, but it's still too early. We're still 3 weeks to a month into this, and we don't. It's a really good start. We don't know what it's going to turn into, but I think it's positive.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's generated interest, which is always good for the sport and the community. So, great effort on that. Absolutely. Colin, how would you describe Johnny as a grappler? Because and tell us, I believe he's a blue belt. Is that correct?
Yeah, Johnny's a blue belt, and just to follow up on his last answer there, Kyle BJJ does a great job of getting a steady stream of new white belts coming in to feed the program, which I've always told them is really important. All martial arts schools are only as strong as their their stream of new white belts because guys just drop off due to life circumstances. Not everybody makes it to black belt. So what I've seen when I was there and then since then is a steady stream of white belts. And I'm going to call out the blue belts that I promoted when I was there for not training as often as they should or for not wearing the gi, Johnny. But if all of our blue belts showed up to guide these white belts along, that would put the program in a stronger spot. But from what I see through social media as well as folks reaching out, like this, Johnny's efforts have been well worth his time, and it's great that he's able to bring so much attention to the program. So kudos to Johnny on that because that was kind of a self-initiated effort there, and he's doing a great job with promotion, and that is a big part of the business. But I just steamrolled right past your question, Garmami. Can you ask me again?
To be honest, I forgot. Oh, wait, I remember. How would you describe Johnny as a grappler? Because
Oh
we've
yeah, so
seen
Johnny, I remember
footage.
Johnny's first day a little bit differently than he does. Uh, I remember usually before class, I'd walk around outside and introduce myself to any new faces. It's intimidating to show up at a martial art gym for the first time. Even now, I've been training for almost 20 years. If I go to a new gym, I still feel that bit of anxiety walking in the first time when you don't know anybody and what you're walking into. So I was walking around, I see Johnny, and I love Johnny. This isn't meant to be a disparaging comment, but he was in no way, shape, or form the same version of himself that he is today.
Yeah.
He looked like a meatball with big black rimmed glasses and like a curly afro, and he did not look like he would survive warm-ups. And so just casually, I said to him, like introduced myself, said to him if he wants to watch the first time, if he's nervous. That's what I always tell people. Watch one if you're not sure and see what it's like, because you're going to have guys on top of you sweating forehead right into your mouth. And it's pretty gross and intimate. So I suggested he watch a class, and he's like, watch a class? Oh, no, I'm signing up for this. I was like, all right, good luck, Johnny. And he came like right out of a cannon. He was reckless with his body, um, more athletic than he looked, and he was like the spazzy white belt that had no idea, no spatial awareness. It was as if you're living in Johnny's world and get out of the way. And he kicked me in the head more times than any white belt should ever kick a black belt in the head
Wow.
when I wasn't rolling with him. When I
Wow.
was with a different group and coaching. And Johnny, he's one of those special creatures that learns lessons through smashings. So I would just have to smash him a little bit, and he was good natured about it, and he always listened to the lessons. It took some time for spatial awareness, but he's really come a long way, and I've seen his training go from what I considered to be, and hey, I was a white belt. I trained hard. I learned these lessons. This isn't coming from a place of judgment. This is just my objective, what I consider the objective truth of what Johnny's game was like. And he's really moderated himself. His spatial awareness is much greater. He's focused on technique as opposed to speed and strength, which, like I said, when you're new, you don't have technique. So you rely on speed and strength. That's all you have. So I've really seen his transition from using his athleticism to throw guys around to the point where he's teaching them very technical ways to approach certain problems on the mats. And he still has the strength and he still has the athleticism. And I see it in these matches where he is relying on, and especially the challenge matches where he's chill, he's calm, he's flowing with these folks. And then when somebody gives him kind of like a little bit of an extra oomph, I see Johnny like serve it right back to them. So he still has all that power and aggression, but the transition to technique, I've been really happy with because I told him many times, I was like, listen, you came out so gung ho. If you burn it yourself out and you quit, I'm going to find you. And he's just like, I won't quit. I won't quit. Okay. Like, and then it became all right, well, if you get injured, and and he did. He did, like everybody does when they're young and aggressive. He got injured several times, and maybe that's what helped moderate him. He could speak to that a little bit. I mean, when you get time off the mats and you're forced to reflect, uh, you really miss the time that you had on the mats, and it often changes the way people roll. But now he's a lot more cerebral now, which is good. And you don't really often hear blue belts being described as cerebral or coaching or teaching other folks. It's almost taboo in the West if a blue belt's teaching somebody something. But in Ethiopia, that puts Johnny at like near the top. He's an advanced belt there. He's near the top. And for him to kind of take on that role and responsibility to pass on knowledge that he's learned, that shows a maturity. And it's quite frankly what Ethiopia needs for guys to continue to progress. And I'll leave it at that.
It's interesting, and thank you for that explanation there and context. I think it's interesting when you say it's taboo that blue belts are involved in coaching and teaching, because that might be taboo now. We're talking 2024, but I can speak to a different part of the West, where 20 years ago it wasn't taboo. When there was a blue belt do you know what I'm saying? In jiu-jitsu in a small town,
100%.
I mean, back then, if you were a blue belt in this style of grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in a small area in Canada or the US, that blue belt was equivalent to, I don't want to say a black belt, but it was a high enough belt to get a lot of recognition as a coach and as an expert. And I don't want to use that word, but you know what I'm saying, right? It held a lot of weight and significance, and as it should, because it's still a belt. It has its merit, but that's 20 years ago, and boy, oh boy, the times have changed, and these grappling sports are obviously developing worldwide, not just in the West, but in Ethiopia. We're speaking to Colin Stewart and Johnny Nigussie about their book called "Bow Before No Man: The Origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Ethiopia." Before I ask this next question, I think, and I don't want to, I feel like I need to put some context, and feel free to jump in on this. But when Johnny, when you say there was no grappling in Ethiopia, but before, I hear you on that. But at the same time, there was grappling, of course, of different style. There was jujitsu. At least there was a pocket of grapplers there that were practicing, as Colin mentioned earlier on, traditional style of jiu-jitsu. That's through the JJIF, which is like they've got their combat stream of jiu-jitsu, and then they've got the Niwaza stream, which is essentially is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. A lot of those people who partake in that competition are Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners. And of course, there was judo as well, as far as competitors. And I speak of Yared as one product of that system. Of course, I have to mention Dr. Seged Digne and Mr. Johannes Daxbar, because I've interviewed them and I've followed their work, their sports development work in that country, and their journey that's been. And I throw that in there as context for people if they want to go back and listen to previous interviews on the Combat Sports in Africa podcast that I put out, including interviews with Colin. So with that being said, I just put that out there for context. Colin and Johnny, how would you describe the jiu-jitsu community in Ethiopia? And it's interesting now because, Colin, you're in Algeria and you're also involved in the grappling scene there. What sets it apart from more, like when you compare the Ethiopian scene vis-a-vis the North African / Algerian grappling scene? How would you differentiate between both? And this is an open question for both of you.
Sure. I'll jump in on the Algeria piece first, and I want Johnny's opinion on that too. But just to circle back on what you said about Dr. Tsagaya, and the history of grappling before me and Johnny in Ethiopia. And you and I, Gramami, have talked about it before, and you're a big part of my education on that topic. I mean, you show up somewhere new, you don't just automatically absorb the history without talking to folks. And in Bow Before No Man, I tried to keep the story to my experience and cut the time frame from when I arrived to when I left, just because there is no beginning or end, so to speak, to tell the story. So we're telling the story from we had to put some artificial timelines on there, and to try to address that and to acknowledge that it's not a complete history. Doctor did contribute, and he did write his origin story for this book, and he's in there. It's one of my favorite ones because his story starts back in 1989. So it's really interesting to see how he came up, and I appreciated that he was willing to write for it. So this is the origin of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and you and I have talked about how I'm a pure BJJ guy, and there's so much more out there. And I've fallen into the bad habit years ago of when I say jiu-jitsu, I'm strictly talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that's changed some since our talks. I have a greater appreciation for the other versions and.
But you know what's funny, Colin? I don't mean to interrupt you, and I hope you continue on that train of thought. When you do say jiu-jitsu, I think for the most part, it is in the West, it's definitely Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and that's where I came up.
Right. That so I totally get your context, and and when we had those conversations, it was interesting, but I think it's a very common when you look at the landscape, particularly in the quote unquote Western world. When we say jiu-jitsu, we mean Brazilian jiu-jitsu and not traditional jiu-jitsu and those other derivatives. And I'm not even talking judo is a different thing altogether. But so I think this is why I asked that question. But please continue.
So yeah, I wanted to make sure that there was at least an acknowledgement of Doctor's efforts before us, Johannes Dogsbauer's efforts before us. I learned a lot by talking to you, talking to Yaret, listening to your podcast interviews with Doctor and Johannes, and they're mentioned in the book, and they should be mentioned in the book. But to be honest, theirs is not my story to tell. So
right.
That's why there's definitely acknowledgement thereof, but it's the starting point of the story is doesn't go back as far as when they started. But
right. And your focus, would it be fair to say your focus essentially was grassroots development at the dojo there, right? And you were strictly focused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as it's taught in the West and through a particular affiliation. You know what I'm saying? Like it was more it was a completely different approach. Whereas their approach, of course, was spreading jiu-jitsu and dojo, and judo. But of course, it was there was a sports development angle that was different in scope and also focused on other aspects of the sport when we speak of sporting administration, in relation also to the international federations and having competitors compete abroad at the IJF level tournaments and JJIF level tournaments. And it's a whole different song and dance. And both initiatives are important in my opinion. Just as someone who's observed this, I think it's great to have all these sports and different tactics to develop them. But I hope I didn't cut you off there. Please continue. I was asking.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll jump in with the community in Algeria versus Ethiopia, and in Ethiopia, there was a group of guys that were grappling for a couple of years, several years before I showed up. And you and I talked before about how impossible they were to find because they didn't have a team name, they didn't have social media,
right.
And I found them just through relentless effort of showing up at gyms and Eventually found doctor's email and he pointed me to Yared. But so we really focused on starting a team. And that might be the best way to describe it is that we started a team. We gave the team a name, social media. We became affiliated with IBJJF, Team Choke Lab, so that the guys have a way to have their belts and promotions recognized and
Nice.
national standards. And that team, we also like expanded that team into Hawassa. Lake expanded the team into Summit condominium area. But that team, like we knew everybody who grappled in Ethiopia. We knew all the jiu-jitsu guys. And if there was anybody out there who claimed to have jiu-jitsu, well, we invited them to the gym. And usually they didn't show up. So we were pretty confident that we knew everybody in the country that was doing jiu-jitsu through any form of structured program. And then when I came to Algeria is a bit further advanced in their jiu-jitsu progression. I think that I have difficulties in Algeria with language barriers, but from what I gather and from what folks tell me, there's probably 8 to 10 legitimate black belts in Algeria, and a lot of them, just due to the proximity to Europe, French language connection, a lot of them have trained in Europe, either in France, either they were diaspora or went there for work and trained and came back to Algeria. Some of the guys trained in London. And there's guys actually in Philly, in my hometown, Philadelphia, who have come back to Algeria who have black belts. And 8 to 10-ish is what I'm told. But then Algeria also has a problem with what they tell me is fake black belts. People promote themselves, and that's what happens when there is no independent standard like JJIF or IBJJF, is that folks start to get promoted outside of the rigorous achievements that you need to be able to show on the mats to deserve promotion. So it also has a fake belt problem, which Johnny and Yared and Lake have told me before that Ethiopia has as well. But there are legitimate black belts here, more than I've met or rolled with in person. And the school I train at here, it's called Algerian Warrior Team. They have a talented black belt named Ardouan Ladjani. He was originally promoted by a French Algerian named Fusi, who gave him this black belt. At the time, they were a De La Riva affiliation. Ardouan has since joined Team Choke Lab with me. And at his school, he's got brown belts under him, purple belts, blue belts, white belts. So it's more developed in terms of the longevity and the belt level. And I don't know how that originally started. I don't know how long ago Ardouan started training in, I think, 2005, and there was nobody around, no black belts around or anything like that. So similar to what you were describing in the West 20 years ago. And he, through people coming through town and teaching and through devout online studying and tutorials and folks coming through town, he's progressed, and he's a second degree black belt. He got promoted to a second degree when my professor Aaron Morris visited Algeria last April. And it's just a more developed structure countrywide here. And it's not just in the capital. I visited Oran, a city a few hours west of here, and we did a seminar there, and they have higher level jiu-jitsu guys there too. So it is beyond just the capital city here. And Johnny visited in April when my professor came out, and I'll let him speak to his experiences and in terms of training here as well.
I heard something about horse liver. Is that correct, Johnny? Do you want to tell us about it?
Oh yeah, that was an experience I would not like to repeat. I mean, it's bad, but for some reason my body didn't react to it well. And
you mean the horse liver?
Yeah, was
Okay.
a kid.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Johnny came out here and he said he was going to try everything. There wasn't anything he was not going to try. He ate sheep's brain,
Wow.
horse liver, horse kidney, a host of other things too. And most of them I don't think were his favorite. But go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, I enjoyed horse meat. I see why some people like it, but the horse liver didn't go well with me. Uh, Taste wise, it was okay, but uh, the experience that we had in Algeria in terms of grappling was unique because the cultures are completely different and the way that it manifests. For instance, just starting from the community, the Ethiopian community is a bit more. It's easier for you to just walk in and fit in. People are a lot more welcoming, and once you just we meet up all the time. We go out as a group, and we are friends on and off the mats. And I think in Algeria, that's a bit kind of different. Correct me if I'm wrong, Colin. I think it's kind of divided into a bunch of cliques within the gym, and I feel like it's a bit more, at least initially when you first walk in, it's a bit more intimidating. But once you get used to the guys, there's a sense of, camaraderie that you build with them. And their skills are, it's interesting because in Kawo, because we train all the time, you kind of feel like a big fish in a small pond. And then you go to Algeria and you start rolling with like 3 or 4 purple belts back to back, and you're mostly defensive. You're getting your ass handed to you, and it was unique for us. I didn't expect I didn't expect that I would be in a gym like this. I thought I was about to, we started training 8 hours a day. We got into a new gym before that for 3 or 4 months. I thought I was about to, okay, I got all this Joan Danaher instructional, so I'm going to show them the things that we learned. And we ended up, you know, being the prey, and we learned a lot. I ended up falling in love with the gi again. I almost denounced it before I went back there, but then I started learning a bunch of stuff, especially when Colin had his time with us, and he just gave us those personal touches and advices that leveled up our game. And uh, as far as talent wise, the Algerian community is a lot more developed because they've had it for a long time. But when I look at our white belts versus their white belts, for instance, I don't exactly know how long some of the guys have been doing it, but because our guys are a bit more smaller, and Yared, because of his size, the stuff that he teaches you, like it is really technical, and most of us have his style to influence us, so we know how to go up against guys that are a bit bigger than us. When you're a smaller guy, whatever you do, when you do it in grappling, it has to be technical, or else you're not gonna, sometimes when you're the bigger guy, you can muscle it off, even if the technique fails you. So I feel like we're a bit more sharper technique wise. And a lot of the guys were telling us, you guys aren't spazzy, you guys are technical. Uh, but besides that, it was a really good experience.
That's awesome. It's interesting because as far as Algeria, their combat sports scene is a really interesting one. On as far as Olympic sports, they have very continentally, they're very dominant in judo. They have a thriving wrestling scene as well, freestyle and Greco-Roman, as well as boxing, and Taekwondo. For the record, I'm just saying they're and in particular their grappling. Judo is and I don't mean to drag judo in a jiu-jitsu conversation. I apologize in advance, but the judo is very hot over there. As you mentioned, Colin, there's a huge community of Algerians in France, and France has a thriving BJJ scene, of course, but it's predominantly a judo country. So I think to some extent, I wouldn't be surprised if a bulk of some of these practitioners who cross over who were probably trained in judo and then crossed over into BJJ. Because it's not uncommon for that to happen, of course. And But anyways, I'm curious to know as far as that experience, Johnny, as far as, going outside of Ethiopia. I know you guys have competed in Kenya as well. So Johnny, you just described the experience of going to a different country with a more, I guess, established grappling and combat sports scene, and you took away, there was something to learn there. Absolutely. You've also competed in Nairobi. How important is that to, I guess, your overall development as a grappler? How much more traveling abroad and outside of Ethiopia do you intend on doing to further your game?
As much as we can, because here we know everyone that does grappling. You know their style, you know what to expect, and eventually you get used to them. And most of the priorities or what we want from the sport is different from what the average grappler wants here. There's 4 or 5 of us that are doing this full time. So uh, the upgrade that we got in our time in Algeria over the course of 2 weeks was more than what we had, training 8 hours a day for like 4 months. We had 3 black belts in one house teaching us and giving us advice that you probably would pay a lot of money for on BJJ Fanatics and whatnot. And it's really important for us to be exposed to different type of styles, people better than us. We, like, for instance, there's a tournament this Sunday, WKO 7, and we already know how it's going to turn out because I've rolled with the guys in the gym all the time. I know their style, I know their weaknesses. And we train harder than most of the guys here. So like, we know how it's going to turn out. But when you're traveling abroad, you don't know, and there's this. It's kind of it makes you nervous because you don't know what to expect, and that's where we actually get to test out our skills, not taking on fights that you know you're going to win. So when there's a chance that you're going to lose, for instance, when I went to Nairobi, I ended up fighting a purple belt, and that's with just like 1 year and 3 months or so of jiu-jitsu. I fought a purple belt with over 13 years of experience, and that taught me a lot. In that moment, like I had to, I was exposed to my weaknesses in a big way. I got thrown with a judo throw in the first 30 seconds of the match, and I realized I needed to work on my stand-up game, and we've been wrestling a lot since then. And I would have never been exposed to that if I'm just practicing here with white belts and beginners most of the time. And when we come back, we bring what we've learned to the community, and we kind of upgrade each other together. And this is also one thing that I really like about the Jiu-Jitsu community in Ethiopia, because there's this culture in Ethiopia where you don't want to share knowledge in fear that your peers might get the better of you. So most of us give a limited form of information. And Cal BJJ and the Jiu-Jitsu community as a whole is one of the only communities that I've been a part of where everyone is eager to teach you something. No one is holding back information. Sometimes it even gets too much, but people are always trying to get you to get better than them. So your biggest competitors are your, best allies in this gym. If we have a match a month from now, I'm trying to get everything that I can. I'm trying to give you all the tips that you can get on how you can, make a really good fight, how you can better defend yourself. And the idea of this, iron sharpens iron mentality is shown in the BJJ community. But as to traveling, if we can, one thing we're trying to focus on is getting as much sponsorships and finding a way to make this a viable thing for the whole team instead of just individually going and competing. Our goal is to compete as a team. We go in as a team and bring back gold as a team. And we've seen other people that have done it in different parts of Africa where they go and compete 3 to 4 or 5 times a year, and everything is paid for by sponsors. And right now we're still kind of figuring out we're just having trouble getting started. But there is a solution to it, and we're hell bent on finding it.
Fascinating. Real quick, can you tell us this tournament that's happening? Who's organizing it, and is it going to comprise of participants from other dojos, or is it predominantly the dojos that you're familiar with or affiliated with?
WKO7 is organized by Kyle BJJ Yared. This is the second ever tournament.
Okay.
And I think what's different about this tournament is that there are multiple teams coming in. And before, everybody used to train together all the time. But now, for the past months or so, me and 6 or 7 other guys have been training at a camp. So there's the Summit guys, there's Omar's guys, and on top of that, there's Kyle BJJ at Juventus Sports Club. So I think it will be interesting because people don't necessarily know what game plan their opponents are having. So there's a certain level of mystery to it. So I think this tournament might be interesting. And you don't know how good or what your opponent is capable of. And I remember Colin talking about how when they were was it Angola? Where you ask one of the coaches, like, how does jiu-jitsu go? And he said something in the lines of, just have two schools. And over the past few months, we've been working on this idea of just expanding a different branch of jiu-jitsu and, getting a group of creating competition. Behind the scenes, we're all one big team. But in the public eye, we want to create this idea that there's two sides and people want to take sides. And then that's, I think, the best way of getting people engaged in the sport and getting them to buy tickets. Now, I think one of the biggest worries that we have is that if we promote the sport and then they come into Juventus to see the tournament, I don't think there'll be enough space for the amount of people that might be coming in. So
it's funny. It's interesting hearing this because it sounds similar to stories of like where you have so many people practicing in one gym and then eventually, inevitably almost, sometimes unfortunately, they branch off and they do their own thing and they start their own gyms and they build up their, you know what I'm saying? And then you've got like essentially all these gyms who are competing, which is great. They have their own sets of students, but then it becomes so competitive that previous friendships are no longer there. Now it's just a competitive rivalry, which in a way is at the core. I hate to say it. No, I don't hate to say it. It is what it is. It's at the core of Jiu-Jitsu's history to some extent, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's history, right? That healthy rivalry amongst different factions and the buildup of the sport. Correct me if I'm wrong, Colin, but
I gave a speech to the guys on this before I left, actually. I told them, like, we were all at a house party and we were talking about who's going to be in what role after I left. And I said that, like, the community is tight right now. Everybody knows everyone, but at certain points in time, inevitably, there's going to be some splintering. There's going to be political issues between people, and like teammates will become rivals. And I told them my advice to them was just never let that get in the way of keep your eyes on the big picture. Don't let it get in the way of your jiu-jitsu development. Little political issues or whatever, rivalries, whatever they may be, they're inevitable in the sport, and use that to feed the jiu-jitsu and grow. And they were all kind of looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like rivalries, and like we're all friends here. But and it doesn't have to be through rivalry. It can be through just like a work conflict where I can't train that night where the gym's open. So I can't make it to class anymore. So I started my own little side gym, and that's what like Lake is going through now out at Summit. He's got some issues that are preventing him from getting to Juventus, but he has his Tuesday, Thursday night program. And so essentially there's 3 programs going in Addis now that are all under Kyle BJJ, but the guys aren't training together as often as they were. So when this tournament comes together, you are going to have guys from 3 different gyms. And then usually we're able to find some international talent passing through town because Addis is an international city. So for most of these WKO events, Warrior King Open, we call it the WKO. We're up to 7 now. There's somebody in town who we haven't seen in the competition floor before. So
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully they're able to find somebody there. But just to circle back real quick on your mention of judo in Algeria, Ardoan Lajani, the black belt I train with here, his son does jujitsu, and I've been to one or two of his, or judo, I'm sorry. I've been to one or two of his judo classes, and there's 70 kids in the class.
Wow.
And judo here is subsidized by the sports federation. Sports federations are very strong throughout Africa. And for Ardoan's son to train judo for 6 months costs roughly $5.
Wow.
So $5 tuition for 6 months of judo, twice a week training. And like every kid in town does it because it's subsidized by the sports federations. And for some reason, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu seems to have a tough time finding its way on the inside with the sports federations, similar in Ethiopia and Algeria, where BJJ is on the outside looking in, so the funds are not available. But I also wanted to comment quickly on Johnny's mention of the cultures being different and it being intimidating here. Muslim culture here, of course, it's traditionally male-female segregation. And it was no different when the guys came out here. We were hanging out with all male crew, and it did not take Johnny very long. I have videos that I'm willing to post online of Johnny dancing with the men here in my living room. Or first time, I think it was the first time Johnny saw a beach, he immediately stripped down to his underwear and started wrestling Algerians in the sand. So
Wow.
talk about, he mentions being intimidated by the culture. It's kind of funny to hear from my end. Yeah, you just got to dance.
Hey Johnny, have you been to the US with Colin yet? Have you done have you trained in the West? Okay. Okay, so you've been in the West, but you haven't trained when you came over. Is that correct? Not yet. Okay. Now, 10 more minutes with you guys, if that's okay. I appreciate the time. I know we're going a little bit over. I want to go back to the book, Bow Before No Man, The Origins of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Ethiopia. Colin, can you tell us one story that was really kind of unexpected, if I can ask? Because I went on Amazon to read about the book, and there are so many themes that you frame in the stories of these youth. From obviously, there's a civil war at the time, still is, I believe. Poverty is a reality. This is during the global pandemic. There's underemployment. There's mental health misconceptions. I'm reading directly off of what's on the Amazon website for the description of the book here. Are there any stories that would surprise people if they picked up this book in terms of thematically speaking?
So I think the coolest story in the book is it's Yared's story, and for a couple of reasons, the content, but also how we had to draw that story out. And in terms of Johnny played a big role. Yared initially he dictated a story and sent it to me, and I wrote it up. And then Yared read it, and he's like, you know what? I was really limited by my English language skills here. This story isn't complete. This isn't the story. So he retold the story in Amharic to Johnny, and then Johnny created an audio file where he translated and he sent it back to me, and I wrote it up and sent it back to Yared. And then even still, like Yared had a few more things he wanted to say about the story. And so just the process of getting that, teasing out that story was an interesting challenge because I mean, I hang out with Yared for several years and we communicate. And then I wonder how many times over those 2 years he felt like he wasn't communicating what he wanted to me, or I was missing details because I don't speak Amharic. So that was interesting. But then just the content itself, the story he tells, basically when he got a couple $100 sponsored to go to a judo competition in Kenya years ago, and how the money wasn't enough for the three guys that were going. So they went through some pretty extreme measures to get there, including riding on the top of an 18-wheeler in lieu of a bus to get down south, and then getting kicked off the trailer outside of a town where there was a Ethiopian tribe that's known for drinking lion's milk. And the driver basically told them go over there and spend the night with them. And
Wow.
like that adventure that Yared went through just for the opportunity to compete in judo. He showed up a couple hours before he was supposed to fight. He said he was filthy. The organizers told him he had to go shower before he could get on the mats because he'd spent days traveling to get there. And to me, like that, there's a romanticism to that story in terms of what he went through to compete. And guys back in the US years ago, competing was a grind. You had to drive several hours away. You spent 8 or 9 hours at a tournament, maybe had 5 minutes on the match on the mats. And then you drove home several hours. And it was like, we used to do that all the time just for the opportunity to compete. And it's nothing in comparison to what Yared went through. And that was pretty fantastic. So like that story to me is one of my favorites. And then also in terms of, since you asked what people might not expect, there's a couple more tragic moments described in the book about some of our teammates. And like, I did not expect as a coach, as a friend to these guys, I did not expect to have these moments in my time in Ethiopia. So just in terms of the unexpected, a few folks suffering some tragedy was just completely unexpected. And there's some insight into the healthcare system in Ethiopia that I think that folks that aren't accustomed to that level of care would find interesting and shocking.
Wow. Well, Colin, tell us, we're going to wrap up very, very soon, but I just want you to tell us a bit more about the book and where can people find it. If they have any questions, where can they reach out to you? And Johnny, also, if you want to tell us where people can reach out if they're going to be visiting Addis from wherever in Africa or all over the world, where they can find the dojos and follow up with y'all.
Sure. So the book, as we mentioned, it's called Bow Before No Man, The Origin of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Ethiopia. Currently, there's a paperback and an ebook version available on Amazon. And it's got several different authors. I compiled all the stories, but it's the stories of 10 or 12 different, mostly 20-somethings Ethiopians going through whatever they're going through in life, and then colliding that with their jiu-jitsu journey. And Johnny's one of the main contributors to it. So I think it'd be great if he spoke a little bit to that. But we can be found on social media, Instagram at cow_BJJ. And there's a couple people that are admins on that account. So if anybody looking to help or contribute, reaching out at cow_BJJ on Instagram is the best way to get in touch with somebody, and we can put you in contact with the best POC.
Awesome. Johnny, do you want to jump in and share anything else in terms of how people, I think Colin answered it there as far as outreach and whatnot, but is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up here?
Yeah, well, Cal BJJ has its training on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for people that want to get their training in on the after work hours and whatnot. And we train in a different batch at Kasanchis during work hours, which is not so comfortable for a lot of people. But we have now started the first women's only self-defense and jiu-jitsu class that is being given twice a week. So it's a women's only class. We teach them twice a week. They're welcome to join the multi-group classes as well. But a lot of, sexual assault have been happening in Ethiopia, and it's been getting recognition in recent days. And I feel like having women engage in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is the next step in growing the sport. The more women we can get to, get more competent in this sport, I think it will also grow the sport and drive more engagement.
I think that's a great initiative. Just hearing that, I think it's very important to engage women in these sports, obviously from a sport and martial arts and self-defense angle. So I congratulations on that initiative, and I hope it grows. And there's so much more to that topic and discussion. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up on that. Maybe looking at various programs across the continent that speak on gender equality in sports, but also the topic of self-defense. And also, I mean, it's such a big topic of here in the West we hear a lot about that, and it's interesting too because on the competitive side, the female grapplers for some countries tend to really do really well, sometimes outperforming the males. So all this to say, it's a big topic. Guys, I want to thank you both for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I will need to get this book to read up on it. I have yet to get it or read it, so I will have to get it. So thank you very much for your time. And any last words before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thank you, Garmami. You've been supportive of combat sports in Africa, specifically, jiu-jitsu, for many years. So that's pretty cool. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing this out on, what is it going to be posted on?
It's on the Combat Sports in Africa podcast. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram. I'll make sure to tag you both if that's cool when this goes out. And all the best at the next tournament there, Johnny.
Thank you. Appreciate it.